Well, I'm back after a fortnight. It had to be Talking Pints, did it not? And I'm joined by historian Martyn Whittock. Martyn, welcome very much to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we spoke following the Queen's death.
Yeah.
As the lines of people behind us were queuing.
Yeah, just over there.
Yep, to go and pay their respects at the Queen's lying in state. And I said to you on the programme, it was sort of down the line, I think, but I said to you on the programme, somehow the death of the Queen and us rediscovering what a constitutional monarchy actually is, because none of us ever debated it, really. I mean, you may have done as an historian, but generally, has it brought history back alive a little bit?
I think for many people in the country, it's been a immersive, historical and constitutional education that as we've lived through this extraordinary experience, it's caused us to think a lot more about who we are and what we are and the nuts and bolts about how our constitutional monarchy works. And I think that's a really good thing, because I think one of the weaknesses of democracy is when people take it for granted. And I think every generation, every decade for that matter, has to relearn what a constitutional democracy is all about and what makes us who we are and how we tick. And I think it's been a challenge to us to think a bit more about how the system works. And I think that's been really very positive out of what was, of course, a very sad time.
Yeah, no, a very sad time, but as you say, a very educational time. You see, one of the things that struck me in all the years I've been doing politics, particularly, is how few people in politics know anything about history at all. And I mean, literally anything about history at all. And I wonder, I mean, as somebody who's been an historian and you've taught history and you've written history and you've lectured history and you've been on GBNews and the BBC and all the rest of it, do people sort of look at historians as if, well, you know, they're sort of vaguely amusing but not really very important?
With all due respect to our politicians, I'd like to see more historians and fewer lawyers. And that's all, with all due respect, I think if we could balance the historians and the lawyers there, then I think we might get a past perspective, or people who perhaps have done history and then done a law conversion. And I think that I'd like to see more of that around. You see, because they've got the historical background and then the legal application.
Yeah, because there's so many people now in politics, in media, in public life, who want to apologise for absolutely everything that ever happened at any point in time in history when there were different social mores. And I've no doubt there'll be people in 50 years' time look back at us and think we're barbarians for one reason or another. How, I mean, you've been in the education sector, you're not anymore. Are we teaching history to our kids properly?
That's a very good question. I mean, certainly within my 35 years of teaching history, I was 35 years at the chalk face, not, of course, that we had chalk for the last 20 years of it. But one of the things that we were very keen on was encouraging students to think and ask questions themselves. And obviously, I can't speak for every school, and I can't speak for the whole system, but certainly within my 35 years, within comprehensive education within the UK, within England, we were challenging kids to look at the evidence, follow the evidence, make decisions yourself, look at the complexity and justify your opinions with evidence.
Critical thinking.
Exactly, and that's transferable skills. We hope that made good historians.
But are we teaching critical thinking anymore? Well, it seems we're producing people out of university who think one side of any argument is virtuous and the other side's evil.
And that's the challenge. The challenge is, as I used to say to the kids in my classroom, basically, that there are no subjects out of bounds, within reason, but I want you to feel that you can ask me as a teacher about whatever is crossing your mind that you don't understand. And I think one of the things that we were trying to get was, we were trying to get kids who were resilient, that people could have differences.
No, you can't. No, you need counselling now if anybody upsets you.
Resilience is crucial. And the ability to disagree. So you and I'll have conversations. There'll be some things we'll disagree about.
Yes.
And we'll disagree profoundly, perhaps. But at the end of the day, we can have a drink and we can part. We don't throw things at each other. And I think that was one of the things I was always encouraging, and my staff were encouraging, people to be able to face debates, to discuss...
Martyn, I don't doubt that you believed in critical thinking and encouraged critical thinking. What I'm saying is I'm worried that our universities are churning out people who've not actually been taught the basics of critical thinking.
And I think that's the challenge. I think we've entered into a particular period within educational experience at the moment, where we become very, very nervous to talk about difficult issues. And I think we have to encourage students to do that. And we have to challenge those institutions that say these are issues that can't be discussed. It doesn't mean to say you agree with those issues. It doesn't mean to say that you propound them.
But you discuss them.
But you discuss them, exactly. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to challenge all our institutions at every level to look at difficult issues and to discuss things respectfully, to be able to disagree.
We've been through these periods before, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, the English Civil War, the period of Cromwell's reign, the madness that it finished up with, where, celebrating Christmas could be an imprisonable offence.
The rule of the major generals when they were enforcing conformity, absolutely.
So we've seen madness here.
Yes.
I mean, do we keep making the same mistakes as human beings?
I think one of the worrying things is that history tends to teach us that we don't seem to learn an awful lot from history. Now, as a historian, you might say, well, I'm doing myself out of a job there. But I think that is one of the challenges, that I think we do need to look back at periods of time in the past and say, well, what went wrong then? But also, what were the principles that went wrong? Because obviously every generation is different. Now is different to the 1650s. Of course it is. But you can look at principles and you can apply them and discuss those. And I think that's what we need to do.
Because human beings haven't changed, have
No,
they?
Exactly.
I mean, at all.
No.
I mean, why does Shakespeare still work? We haven't changed a bit. Now, I'm really fascinated by some of the work you've done, and this really fascinates me. Trump and the Puritans, how the evangelical religious right put Donald Trump in the White House. Now, he's a friend of mine, and I could call him many things, but someone that was attractive to the Puritans, and I find that a bit difficult. Explain.
Well, basically, what the book did was, it came out in 2020, we tried to explore why, for example, the evangelical right within the USA supports Trump. 81% of white evangelicals voted Trump. I calculated that was something like 33.7 million voters. Wow. Extraordinary.
The Bible Belt.
Yeah, absolutely. And beyond the geographical Bible Belt. And one of the things that we wanted to do was we wanted to explain how the Trump phenomenon, whatever one thought about it, was rooted in the deep story of American history. It was rooted in how Americans saw themselves, viewed themselves, the narrative they constructed about themselves, which stretched right back to New England in the 1620s. Obviously, it's quite ironic that both the anniversary of the Mayflower settlement arrival and Trump's victory both took place, a similar sort of period of time. Quite dramatic that was. And the anniversary of one coincided with what's happening with Trump as well. And we wanted to say, well, 1620, what about 1620 helped lead to Trump's America? Obviously, he wasn't elected in the end in 2020, but we felt that the roots went back to American exceptionalism, the idea of America being a city on a hill, the idea of America being a new Israel, a new Jerusalem in the wilderness. So these things are freighted with all sorts of problems, I have to add, but they help explain something about how people see themselves in the States and how they felt Trump was going to return to those situations, make America great again. Now, many Americans will say, well, we never stopped becoming great. But clearly, it was rooted in a sense of the past.
And given him and his lifestyle and his background, it's fascinating. You've written, of course, a lot about Soviet Russia and secret services and Putin, of course, being a product of it. Impossible to discuss Ukraine without thinking a little bit about the history of it and what a mess it is.
Indeed.
How does it end, Ukraine?
Well, that's a very good question, because, of course, it's a contested deep story as well. I mean, Vladimir the Great, who was baptised in the 10th century, the beginning of Orthodox Russia. It's Kiev Rus. It happens on Crimea, which is why this area is contested, which is why the Russians have this complicated attitude towards Ukraine. And it's
never going to stop, really.
It's very, very difficult at the moment to see Putin stepping back from the situation that he currently is in, because he's dug himself so deep and he's invested so much into this deep story, and so much of it is about him and how he understands Russia. It is very difficult at the moment to see him stepping back from the situation that he has created since February this year.
No, I agree. And you're a strong Christian.
Yes.
A lay preacher. You've written an extraordinary book about Jesus Christ, the unauthorised biography.
Indeed.
We haven't really got time for all of that. But there's no doubt, is there, that the Judeo-Christian roots underpin all that the West is?
Very much so, and I think we need to recognise that. Very often people say that we are rooted in Enlightenment values of the 18th century, without looking at the fact that the Enlightenment itself was rooted in a Judaic Judeo-Christian belief in the importance of the individual, of the importance of the mind, the importance of debate and discussion. So the roots of our society and of Western European society, which we have in common with Europe, it goes back to its Judeo-Christian roots. Now, that has plenty of room for other people as well. Absolutely. We're not talking about exclusivity,
but we need to
recognise it and celebrate it too.
Agree more.
Absolutely.